Greetings for the day, everyone. I'm privileged to welcome you all into the third edition of Orange City Literature Festival, organized by SGR Knowledge Foundation in association with GH Raisoni University, powered by Raisoni Group of Institutions. I am Prati Chandekar, delighted to be your anchor for today's session. More Things in Heaven and Earth by Ms. Kiran Manral in conversation with Ms. Rashmi Menon. Ms. Kiran Manral is an award-winning and best-selling Indian author, TEDx speaker, columnist, mentor, and feminist. She has written books across genres in both fiction and non-fiction. She lives in Mumbai. She was a journalist at the Asian Age, the Times of India, features editor Cosmopolitan, India Cultural Lead and Trendspotter at Gartner Iconoculture, senior consultant at Vector Insights, ideas editor, She the People, TV, and is currently an independent research and media consultant. She was shortlisted for the Femina Women Awards for Literary Contribution in 2017. The Indian Council of UN Relations with the Ministry of Women and Children, Government of India, awarded her the International Women's Day Award 2018 for excellence in the field of writing. Her novella, Saying Maya, was longlisted for the 2018 Sabater Award, supported by the Arts Council of England in the UK. Her novels, The Face at the Window and Missing Pursued Dead, were both longlisted for Geomami Award to Screen, and The Face at the Window was also presented at the South Asian Film Festival 2019. Her books include The Reluctant Detective, Once Upon a Crush, All Abroad, Karmic Kids, The Story of Parenting Nobody Told You, A Boy's Guide to Growing Up, True Love Stories, Saving Maya, 13 Steps to Bloody Good Parenting, Raising Kids with Hope and Wonder in Times of a Pandemic and Climate Change, The Face at the Window, Missing Perfumed Dead, The Kitty Party Murder, and More Things in Heaven and Earth. She also has published short stories in various magazines in acclaimed anthologies like Have a Saint's Journey, Boo, Grandpa's Tale, The Best Asian Speculative Fiction 2018, Magical Woman, and City of Scream. It's an honor to have you with us, Ms. Kiran Manral. And this gets even more delightful as we have Ms. Rashmi Menon, who will be in conversation with her as the moderator. Rashmi Menon has been a part of the Indian publishing industry for more than a decade. She is currently the managing editor at Emeralds, an imprint of Manjul Publishing House. She has worked with several best-selling writers and has edited a variety of books over the years, from commercial and literary fiction to a variety of non-fiction such as foreign affairs, memoirs, and self-help. In 2018, she was chosen by the Embassy of the Federal Republic of Germany to represent India on their visitors program, which focuses on information exchange and the creation of networks between international publishers. She enjoys helping new authors develop a book idea to really make it their own and get a kick from seeing her project released in print. Once again, I welcome you both. Also, before moving ahead, I would like to take a moment and acknowledge the supporter of Emrys's publishers at their association is valuable to OCLF. Now, my dear audience, you are about to experience a conversation between two very dynamic individuals. So, without skipping a moment, I humbly invite Ms. Rashmi Menon to lead us ahead.
Thank you, Prachi. Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be here and be in conversation with one of my favorite authors, Kiran Manral. Kiran and her books are very special to me. I've had the privilege to work with her on 3 books and hopefully the good fortune to work with her on many more together. Prachi has already introduced Kiran to all of you, but I'd like to add a bit to that. Kiran has published books in several genres, fabulous books. But I think she has a special knack for what we call the genre benders. You can't fit them into a box, you can't put them into a category, you can't call them only just mystery, thriller, or romance. But by the time you end up finishing the book, by the time you end up reading the book, you end up feeling like you've literally been punched in the gut and you go through this roller coaster ride of emotions and perhaps the deepest, darkest, most painful thoughts and feelings that most would rather not talk about. And one such feeling is that of grief. I don't think I know of any other author who has brought out grief in so many layers in its rawness. And that brings me to Kiran's latest book, very aptly and interestingly titled More Things in Heaven and Earth. So, Kiran, tell us a little bit about your book and why you chose this title for it.
Thank you, Rashmi. Thank you, Prachi, for that very kind introduction. And Rashmi, of course, for taking on these genre benders and sticking by them and having the faith in them. I think that's an act of bravery by itself that you trust them.
No, no, it's a
Why?
pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Why did I write this book and why did I give it this title? Um, Rashmi, a lot of the books that I've done with you, the 3 books that I've done with you, have been books about women in difficult circumstances. The first was about a woman who was waiting to die, who had nobody with her, the face at the window. The second was about a woman who's surrounded by family and yet intrinsically all alone. And the third, More Things in Heaven and Earth, is about a woman who is young, but she's a widow. And very often, widowhood is considered as the end all of a woman's life. I mean, not anymore so much, but still, seems to be a school of thought that maintains that a woman's value is defined purely by either her marital status, her reproductive status, her value to her family. And I wanted to explore what happens when a woman is still in a prime of life and she's widowed. But of course, as Rashmi says, I won't do it very straightforwardly. I will bring something dark and something noir into it, and something that will be a little what if and what did happen, and was that really what I read into the book? So that's how More Things in Heaven and Earth, the title came about. The title is, of course, as we all know, from a quote by Shakespeare, and it is at a particular point in Hamlet where the protagonist is being wondering about things, and there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of by all your philosophy. So there are more things that we cannot explain, and I'm a firm believer of this, that we don't really understand all the phenomena that goes around us. There are things that are still inexplicable. There are things that are beyond the realm of scientific evaluation and explanation. And by trying and what do we do as writers? We try to bring out various things that are understood as well as the things that are not understood and not explicable. And some things in this book I think are not very explicable. And you know it best, Rashmi.
Yes, yes. Many things are inexplicable, and we will come to that much later. Lot of interesting, inexplicable, strange things about Kiran and her books. Uh, yeah, so coming to your female characters, Kamala Malik specifically, the female characters are incredibly complex and multi layered. In More Things in Heaven and Earth, Kamala Malik, as you just told us, is young and recently widowed and going through a tumultuous range of emotions. And one can easily question her moral compass. How easy or challenging was it to write the character of Kamla Malik, and what were you trying to tell your readers through Kamla?
Kamla Malik is every woman, every flesh and blood woman who has experienced grief and loss. But her grief is layered, and that's what we find out in the book. And there is, while she's seeking closure, there is that underlying sense of wanting to get on with her life. I think there is that certain core of selfishness that also helps us preserve ourselves when we go to grief, because while we will marinate in grief, while we will let ourselves grieve for a certain period of time, there is that sense that you have to pick yourself up and move on. And Kamla is very clear about that. She wants to move on, but she is also being held back. She's also being haunt, for the lack of a better word to use, haunted by memories, haunted by her deceased husband, haunted by the things, trying to know what happened and what might have happened. How difficult it was it to write this character? Not very, because I think, Rashmi, you just have to tap that vein within yourself as a woman to realize that, women, our female characters need not be the likable characters that everybody assumes them to be. It's not necessarily it's not necessary to write black and white characters who fall within the prescribed norms of how a widow should behave, how somebody who has just lost a husband should behave. I think one of the more telling Amazon comments was that Kamla Malik is a widow, but still she has sex with two men. So I think people are
That
quite shocked
their
by
kind
that.
of self compass, yeah,
Yeah,
that's what.
yeah. But she's not denying her body. She is very clear that she does have bodily needs and she does have desires. She can mourn her husband. She can say that she feels his loss very deeply. She is grieving for him. But her body is real, it's alive, and it has its needs, and she's not denying that. So I think that complexity grapples with all of us, and I think I just try to put that down as honestly as I could. And if it startles people, that's how women are. We're complex.
Does it ever, while you're writing these complex characters, does it ever, while you're writing it, does this question ever come to your mind that what would my readers think about this character?
No, actually, I think if I started thinking about what readers would think, I would never be able to be honest with the character,
Right,
because
right.
the character doesn't really care about what the readers think. The character is just living her own life and doing what she has to do and trying to get on with it. Because if I'm not writing characters who need to be liked, if you're writing a character who needs to be liked, I want my readers to identify with the characters, but I don't want them necessarily to like the character. I want them to, look at the character and say, well, this could be me in that circumstance.
Yes.
Would I have done the same thing? Would I not do the same thing? Is she doing the right thing? That's for each person's internal moral compass to decide. But I also say that why do we assume that when a woman is a widow, she should just, hang herself up on the shelf and say, like, all my life is over. I don't have anything left. I mean, I shouldn't have any pleasure. I shouldn't have any joy. I should keep denying myself. Why? She's not cheating on her husband, right? The poor chap has passed away. So, in that sense, it's not adultery and it's not immoral. It's not like she's getting into any adulterous relationship, so to speak. So, there is so much of judgmentalism that we have as people. I think I want to maybe not shake people up, but to just raise quiet questions as to why do we think this, and why do we hold women to such higher standards than we hold men.
True, true. Yes, that's what I think Kamla's character really brings to the fore, that it makes you think, it makes you question. So, speaking of female characters, let's talk a bit about the protagonist in your previous books, Voice at the Window and Missing Presumed Dead. Your female characters, as you just said, are never really black or white. It's difficult to decide whether to love them or not. And with each female character, you explored a stage, different stages in a woman's life. Tell us a little more about them, what they represent, and how you manage to bring that pain as well as pleasure that they go through.
Very honestly, I see these three books, The Face of the Window, Missing Presumed Dead, and More Things in Heaven and Earth, as a triptych of sorts. I started with the oldest character, that's Julia McNally. She's an Anglo-Indian retired school teacher. She's living in a cottage isolated at the edge of a hill town. And what happens to her? She has no one with her. I wanted to explore with Julia. I I wanted to have a protagonist who is not in her early 20s. In all these books, I was very clear about that because there are plenty of people telling the stories of young women. I think women of a certain age also need to have their stories told. So while Kamla Malik is much younger than the other two, Aisha Thakur in the next book is in her mid 40s. Julia McNally is a character who is looking for identity, her own identity. She's an orphan, she doesn't know where she comes from, and she has sort of done the same thing to her own child again. So there's that repetition of guilt. She has never known a mother, she doesn't know how to mother. So, what is a mother? Who is a mother? And that self preservatory instinct, which made her take some decisions in her life, and she's been regretting them ever since. I don't want to raise the question of whether that was right or wrong, or whether that was the best she could do at that point in her life. But the fact that she regretted them later and she's still grappling with them, and of course, the hauntings that came subsequently. My aim with the face at the window was purely to show how lonely we can get in our old age, and how we need, when we look back at our lives, then there may not necessarily be a sense of closure or a sense of, okay, I've lived out a good life. And then how do you deal with that? With Missing Presumed Dead, Aisha Thakur, my protagonist, she's in her mid 40s. She was a very beautiful woman. She's lost some of her looks. So there is that insecurity. I also wanted to talk about what happens if you're not, you are dealing with mental illness, and you have a family that loves you but doesn't know how to handle you when you are going through that. And and maybe you're also very resistant to accepting the fact that you need help, and you need to take, be on certain medication or go to a therapist to do things like that. How does your family handle all that? So Aisha Thakur is quite rebellious in her own way. She decides to do what she wants to do, and in this whole thing, she goes missing one day, but it's not missing because she wants to go missing. And for the rest of that, of course, you have to read the book. So she's another very complex character, not because she has a mental illness, also because of the circumstances that surround her, and the position she's in. With More Things in Heaven and Earth, yes, Kamla is a widow. I wanted to explore widowhood. I wanted to explore young widowhood. I wanted to explore the fact that what gives women power. I think German Greer or I forget who said men should stop making widowhood a woman's sole source of power. So I think that quote stayed with me. I'm not sure who said it, but that quote stayed with me as to what if a woman becomes a widow. She has enough money to survive, but what will propel her forward in her life, and what are the pitfalls she has to look out for? So I think Kamla Malik came from that position. And also grief. My mother lost her husband when she was very young. My father died when he was quite young, and I saw her go through that grief. So I think I channeled a lot of that into writing the character of Kamla Malik, as to the different stages and the layers and how you experience grief. It first came out, I think, with Julia McNally when she loses her lover in The Face at the Window. I think I explored it more deeply in this book, writing about grief.
Yes, you have. Also, the entire concept of aging. I mean, it's not just in the head, but when you read, you can literally feel it on your skin. You can feel your knees creaking. That is the sort of effect your writing brings out. I mean, I read Face at the Window probably 5 years ago, three, 4 years ago, and I could. It's so real. I could feel my skin aging, while reading it. That's the sort of um, depth and reality that your writing brings to the fore. But also, another very distinct feature of your books is that they're never a case of show and tell. It's like the words sink in slowly and surely, and in such a way that while reading, you can literally feel the pain that the character is going through. And here, I'd like to read out a few lines which have stayed with me from your latest book. I eventually withdrew myself and mopped my face and my nose with the back of my sleeve. Grief isn't elegant, it is messy, snot nosed, feral, aching, beast that slobbers into one's sane moments and scratches the door of one's composure insistently, demanding to be let out. Considering what all of us have gone through this year because of the pandemic, I'm sure that everyone can identify with what I just read. So, when it comes to emotions such as death, grief, and desire, one tends to look for closure. So, whether it be in the case of your previous novel, Missing Presumed Dead, or in More Things in Heaven and Earth, the endings don't offer closure. They're open ended. And as a reader, too, one usually yearns for a happy ending, some sort of closure. So, but in the case of these two books, they're open-ended and there's this pity of continuity. So why is it so? And is that a well thought out decision to let it remain open for interpretation?
I agonize over my endings, Rashmi. It takes me. The endings probably come to me after the 15th revision. the 15th, I rewrite the books like 10 to 15 times before it even comes to you. So it takes me years and years. Each book takes me around 4 years to write. Uh, no, I don't know what the ending will be, and I don't know whether it will be open or closed. It just happens at a point when I'm writing it. The story tells me this is where I need to stop the story,
Okay.
and I don't like happy endings. It's not because I don't like happy endings and I don't want to give my reader a sense of closure. It's because life doesn't have happy endings all the time. There's always that tomorrow, Scarlett O'Hara, tomorrow is another day. So there's always a story that goes on, nothing ends. And a happy ending is just where you choose to end the story, but the story does go on, right? The wonderful thing about not having a defined ending and a happy ending and a sense of closure is that readers get back to me with so many interpretations of what could have happened or what happened. And I get to see so many diverse options. It like spreads out like a, a tree that, this could have happened, that could have happened, did this happen, did that happen, more so in Missing Presumed Dead. And face at the face at the window, it was I think quite closure enough, but it was a
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
But with Missing Presumed Dead, and More Things in Heaven and Earth also, I got a lot of reader response saying that what happened afterwards, and I'd like the book to haunt them. I'd like, like haunt them in the literal sense. What could have happened? And
Such you are very successful at that, Kiran. You're very successful at that. Yeah.
so that is the point that I say, okay, fine. Now I need to stop writing here. I can't take the story any further. Let this reader take the story further in their head, and that will give it the ending that will satisfy them. And if it leaves it unresolved, then it'll linger with them, and they'll keep thinking about it. And that's my work done.
Okay. But if given another chance, would you want to change any of the endings in your open-ended books?
No,
No.
no,
Okay.
no, because that's where I've left the story. Maybe I'd want to pick it up again later. I don't know. That's where the story has ended for me. And I can't go back and tamper with this story because it's done for me. Maybe if I feel like picking it up and taking it down later and then giving it a happy ending or any ending, whatever, the resolution would just change the entire unresolvedness that I have with these books.
Okay. So, changing track. Now let's come to the child characters in your book. They are nowhere near the cherub-faced, innocently curious characters that mostly we come across in books. They are instead painfully mean, thinking dark thoughts, pinching their clothes and saying, "Mother promise." And all of this seems so terribly real. I mean, if we were to be honest with ourselves and if we look back at our childhood, one would identify with these characters either in ourselves or with the children we played with, our siblings, or whoever we spent time with. So, where do these characters stem from? And do you feel that writing the character of a child is perhaps more challenging than writing about the character of an adult?
They both come with their own challenges, Rashmi. Children have a much straighter worldview, but children are also very complex.
Yes.
They're very complex, and to I think to portray them accurately, to get into their head, as you said, we all remember that what we were as children. So what we were as children, yeah. So we were very good kids on the outside, but within our heads, we were plotting as to how to get at the sweets and how to, undermine some other kid and make that kid seem bad in front of the adults. So children are complex, and children can be as much and worse bullies than adults. They can be pretty mean. They can, undermine an adult's confidence. They can do a lot of things, and they can be ferociously self-preservative. So in Missing Presumed Dead, the daughter of my protagonist, she's at a very difficult age. She's at adolescence and she's going through her own issues, and her mother is obviously in no condition to take care of her and to address her issues, though she loves her very much. So she comes with her own set of complexities, and that Jean has somehow, I wouldn't say Jean because I'm not a medical expert, but somehow what is afflicted her mother and her grandmother has come down to her as well, and she knows it. She can see that kernel within herself, and she's battling it, but yet she's in such a difficult family situation that she has no option but to be mean. And I think in that meanness was a self-preservation. So I think we should write children as they are. Children are lovely, but children can also be nasty little creatures. I mean, I have one of my own who's lovely at times, and sometimes he makes me realize why some animals eat their young. So
True, true. Yeah. Okay. Now, my favorite part. So, a very distinctive feature of this book, and many others, is the presence of paranormal elements. And one is never really clear whether their existence is in the mind of the protagonist or whether they actually exist. Also, after a point of time, faint-hearted readers like me start feeling like they've jumped out of the pages and are part of my immediate surroundings. Um, so, what has inspired you to weave into your stories these elements, the paranormal, the supernatural, the afterlife, and then also sort of making the reader question whether, this is just a figment of their imagination or, term it scientifically as sleep paralysis, which is very mean of you to do because you're like thinking that this is supernatural and then suddenly you put this question in the reader's head. So I want to know whether you've had any personal experiences and please do share them with us. I know that what you've written can't just be a figment of your imagination. It is much more than that. You cannot escape this question this time.
so trust my editor to put me on the spot. Rashmi, they'll have me marched off to the loony bin if I start talking about this. No. I think all of us have had some experiences that we can't quite explain. Some of us may find rational explanations for what we've experienced. Some of us don't. And I've always had a very vivid imagination. I was a kind of, unbearable little kid who would sit down at the window and watch the clouds and tell my mother, "Hey, elephant, hey, horse." So, everything was something to me. Everything. I mean, a mountain, a hill could be a whale moving through. And um, when I was very young, I think I had certain, when I was barely 2 or 3, I must have very young, I think younger than that also, I told my mother that auntie walked past our door, and that auntie had died recently. She had been burned to death, and my mother was shocked. I don't remember this very clearly, but things happen, and things keep happening. And sometimes I'm not sure whether I'm imagining it or whether they've really happened, but I think we all have a little bit of sensitivity, some of us more than the others. And maybe I'm a little more sensitive than the others, that I pick up certain vibrations. And most of the times I tell myself I've imagined something, but sometimes I can't explain what I've seen, and I can't explain what has happened. And I think that's what I try to put in my books. I can't explain what has happened. It could have been my imagination, it could have been something that's really happening. And I leave it to the reader. I like to leave it to the reader because not everybody would see. It's very cathartic to read something and get the fear of something and let it out. And that catharsis is good for us as humans because it releases all that pent up emotion and that fear. But to sink into believing that this could happen, and somebody could just jump out from behind me, and whatever, that could be scary. So when it's ambiguous, it's a little safer, I feel, to believe in.
I don't think there is anything ambiguous about your writing, especially when you're writing horror fiction. And I'd like to inform all fans of horror fiction that there is another fabulous and extremely terrifying book that Kiran has written titled The Face at the Window. And a word of advice for faint hearted readers like me: do not read this novel at night. So whatever Kiran imagines, they actually sort of jump into the book. And if you have a very wild imagination like me, you will start sensing all that Kiran Manral has put into her book. So lastly, Kiran, when you write, does it help you escape from reality, or does it give you a sense of catharsis?
That's a very good question, Rashmi. I don't know why I write. Seriously, I think it's a bit of both. It's a bit of escaping from reality. Reality is pretty boring, and I get to live so many lives through my characters, which I wouldn't be able to live before. When I was writing The Face at the Window, I actually began getting knee pains and joint pains and stomach. I mean, I could feel, because I'd internalized the character so much and her aging. I could feel my then 40 something body going into pot. So I live all these characters as I write them, and because I live them and I sort of write them as they would be feeling things, I think that's what makes the protagonists very believable. So that could be my catharsis also. And the stories tell themselves. I think if it's a genuine story, it comes from somewhere out of the ethers and it writes itself. You're just the channel to type it out, and of course you have to get your grammar right and your spelling right and all those things, but you're just the typist, so to say, and the story tells itself. And those are the best kind of stories. Those are the best books that happen. The books where you have to force the plot through and you have to work on it. Of course, I have great admiration for those who can plot something out to the T and write it and know exactly where they're heading. It saves a lot of time to do that. But the joy of knowing the unexpected directions your character and their lives can take comes only when you are an organic writer and you have no clue where the story is headed, because then the characters do just what they want to do and you're just sort of narrating it. And sometimes they're saying, no, you can't do that. This is not what I thought you would be like. You can't behave like this. But the character says, just shut up and type it up. So you do what they tell you to do. So there is catharsis, there is escapism, and there is the need to tell the stories which I think not many people are telling.
Yeah, it's okay. So, on that note, we come to the end of this very insightful and interesting conversation. Kiran, you never fail to amaze me. On one hand, you're fangirling and talking about Korean drama and cracking jokes on Twitter. And on the other hand, you send me these manuscripts which have me trembling with fear, wondering what's going to happen next, either in the book or in my immediate surroundings. Uh, so thank you for writing the way you write. And I mean, I completely agree with your method of writing. Go with the flow, be organic, and for the rest, we editors are there to take care of all that. And for all those who are watching this video, for fans of horror fiction, mystery, and all the things that lie between the two, Kiran's books are what you must read. More Things in Heaven and Earth is available on all online portals and bookstores near you. Please do buy a copy of this book and let us know what you think. And a big thank you to Prachi and everyone at Nagpur Lit Fest on behalf of Kiran, Amaryllis, and imprint of Manjul Publishing House. I would like to say a big thank you for giving us this platform to talk about our books.
Thank you so much, Rashmi, for all those insightful questions and for taking on my books and trusting them. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Always our pleasure.
Thank you so much, ma'am. At the outset, I would like to thank Kiran Manral, ma'am, and Rashmi Menon, ma'am, for joining us today. We wish we get to hear you both again and be equally enlightened as we all are today. For my dear massive audience, I'm sure that after witnessing this conversation, you all are taking home an enriched version of yourself, just as I will. Thank you for joining us today. Until I see you again, this is Prachi Chandekar signing off.
Welcome to Raisoni Group, a vision beyond.